Hey everyone. Thanks for clicking. My name is Connor, I'm 28, and my own mother called the cops on me to perform a wellness check. All because I refused to give her $2,000 for my sister's birthday party. A party that was scheduled just days after she, my father, and my sister didn't bother to show up to my master's degree graduation. Before I tell you exactly what the police said and how this all exploded in a way my family never saw coming, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can reach. Okay, so let's get right into it. The beginning of the end started with a text message. A simple, cold, blue bubble on my phone screen that managed to erase the last tiny flicker of hope I had for my family. 3 days before that text, I had sat in a sea of black robes and cardboard hats, listening for my name. Connor Reed, Master of Data Analytics. I walked across the stage, shook a stranger's hand, and accepted a rolled-up piece of paper that had cost me thousands of dollars and countless sleepless nights. As I walked back to my seat, I couldn't stop my eyes from scanning the audience, going right to the spot where my family was supposed to be. Section 2B, Row 5, Seats 1 through 4. For empty chairs. They were a black hole in a galaxy of cheering parents, sobbing grandparents, and proud siblings. I'd sent the invitation 2 months in advance. I followed up. It's a 2-hour drive, Mom. I can get you a hotel room. The excuses were flimsy. Oh, your father's back has been acting up. Ava has a big test to study for. The usual stuff. After the ceremony, while everyone else was taking pictures with their families, I stood alone by a brick wall, pretending to be intensely interested in an email on my phone. Just trying to look busy. Trying to look like I wasn't completely and utterly alone. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. It was my mother, Eleanor. My heart did a stupid little jump. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the apology. The "so proud of you, son" text I'd been waiting for my entire life. I opened it. The message read, "Need $2,100 for your sister's sweet 16. Her party is next week. No hello. No how are you. No congratulations on your master's degree. Just a demand. A bill." I stared at the screen, and something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. Turned to dust. All those years of trying, of sending money home, of hoping one more achievement would finally make me enough. It all just vanished. I opened my banking app. I had a little over $3,000 to my name. That was it. That was my entire life savings, the cushion I needed to find a real job, to maybe even put a down payment on a decent car. And she wanted 2/3 of it. For a party. I scrolled to Venmo. I typed in my mother's name. For the amount, I entered $1. And in the memo line, I wrote a single word, "Congrats." I hit send. Then I blocked her number. I blocked my dad's number. I blocked my sister's. An hour later, a locksmith was at my apartment door, replacing the lock on the door my mother had a spare key to. As the old lock tumbled into the locksmith's hand, I felt a strange sense of peace. It lasted for exactly 2 hours. Then came the loud, authoritative knock on my door. I looked through the peephole. 2 police officers. My blood ran cold. To understand the sheer, mind-numbing audacity of my mother calling the police, you have to understand that the empty chairs at my master's graduation weren't a one-time thing. They were a tradition, a cruel, recurring theme in the story of my life. Let's rewind 10 years. I'm 18, sweating in a polyester gown at my high school graduation. I was salutatorian. I had a speech to give. It was a big deal, or at least it was a big deal to me. I had practiced my speech in the mirror for weeks, trying to get the tone just right. A mix of hopeful, funny, and grateful. Grateful to the teachers, to my friends, and to my family. That part felt like swallowing sand, but I wrote it in anyway. From the stage, I could see the entire crowd. I saw my best friend Leo's family, his dad holding up a giant camcorder like it was 1995. I saw my girlfriend's parents waving frantically, and then I saw the section where my family's seats were. Empty. All 3 of them. I gave my speech. My voice barely trembled. I talked about the future, about seizing opportunities, about the foundations we'd built here. But inside I felt like a fraud. A kid talking about strong foundations whose own foundation was built on quicksand. Afterward, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry," she said, her voice dripping with a syrupy, fake regret I'd come to know so well. "Ava came down with a terrible fever this morning. We just couldn't leave her." I later saw pictures on my sister's Facebook page. She was at the mall with her friends, very much not having a fever. The timestamp on the photos was right in the middle of my speech. When I quietly mentioned it weeks later, my mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, she felt better in the afternoon. You know how kids are. Don't be so dramatic, Connor." 4 years after that, it was my college graduation. Bachelor's in economics. I graduated with honors. This time, the excuse was a last-minute, non-refundable weekend trip they had booked. "The deal was just too good to pass up, sweetie," my dad had explained over the phone, his voice weak and apologetic as always. "We'll celebrate when we get back, I promise." They never did. There was no celebration. There was just a card with a $20 bill inside that arrived a week later. Each time it was like a small death, a confirmation of a truth I didn't want to face. In the Reed family, there were 2 tiers of children. There was Ava, the golden child, whose every whim was a family emergency. And there was me, the support system, the financial bedrock, the one who was expected to understand, to sacrifice, to be the mature one. My achievements weren't milestones to be celebrated. They were just expected. They were line items on a checklist that proved I was self-sufficient and therefore capable of providing more. So when I saw those empty chairs at my master's graduation, I wasn't surprised. Disappointed? Yes. Heartbroken? Absolutely. But not surprised. It was just the final, most expensive confirmation of my place in the family. I was the provider, not the son. The investment, not the child. And I was beginning to realize that some investments just aren't worth the cost. Especially when the only thing you get in return is an empty seat and a bill for your own replacements party. The financial drain didn't start with that $2,100 request. God, no. That was just the grand finale of a 16-year-long performance. My role in the family, the one I had been cast in since I was a teenager, was the human ATM. It started when I was 16. I got my first real job working the morning shift at a Starbucks before school. The smell of burnt coffee and steamed milk still brings me back. I was so proud of that first paycheck. It was $184.32. I felt like a millionaire. I thought I'd save up for a car, or maybe for a part of my own college fund since I knew my parents weren't putting anything aside for me. That dream lasted about a week. The texts from my mom started as small requests. "Hey sweetie, can you pick up some milk on your way home? I'm a little short." I'd do it, of course. Then it became, "Ava needs new cleats for soccer. They're $150. Can you help out? I'll pay you back on Friday." Friday would come and go. The money never did. Soon, the pretense of paying me back vanished entirely. The texts became commands. "Ava's friends are all going to the concert. Ticket is $80. The school trip to the Science Museum is $50. She needs it by tomorrow." Her phone screen cracked again. "That's $200. I was working 20 hours a week, and my bank account was always hovering near zero. My grades started to slip a little. I was perpetually exhausted. Meanwhile, Ava, who was 4 years younger, had the newest clothes, the latest phone, and never had to work a day in her life. Her life was funded by my 4 a.m. wake-up calls and my weekends spent dealing with angry customers who wanted extra foam on their lattes. Once I tried to say no. I was 17 and trying to save up for a new laptop for college. The one I had was ancient and could barely run Microsoft Word. My mom asked for $300 for a weekend cheerleading camp for Ava. "I can't, Mom," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I'm saving for a computer for school." The silence on the other end of the line was icy. Then came the guilt trip, honed to a razor's edge from years of practice. "Oh," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. "I see. So your sister's happiness doesn't matter. She'll be the only girl on the squad who can't go. She'll be devastated." But I guess your little laptop is more important than your sister's heart. Caved. Of course I caved. I gave her the money. I spent my first semester of college taking notes by hand and writing papers in the crowded campus library because my old laptop finally died. It became the pattern of our lives. My successes were opportunities for them to ask for more. I got a scholarship to college? Great. Now you can use the money you saved to help us with the property taxes. I got a paid internship? Perfect. We need to fix the transmission on the car. I played the part because I was a kid who desperately wanted his parents' love. I thought that if I just gave enough, if I just solved enough of their problems, one day they would turn to me and say, "Thank you, Connor. We're so proud of you. We love you." I was buying into a fantasy. I was feeding coins into a slot machine that was never, ever going to pay out. I was funding their life, funding my sister's idealized childhood. And in return, they gave me nothing. Not their time, not their respect, and certainly not their unconditional love. All I was to them was a number in a bank account. And the day I got my master's degree, the day I should have been celebrated, they were already calculating their next withdrawal. Getting my master's degree was supposed to be my trump card. It was the final, undeniable piece of evidence I could present to the jury of my family to prove my worth. It was my closing argument. Working my way through that program was brutal. I wasn't some kid fresh out of undergrad whose parents were footing the bill. I was working a full-time, dead-end data entry job during the day and taking classes at night. My life was a monotonous cycle of Excel spreadsheets, academic papers, and cheap microwave dinners. My social life was non-existent. While guys my age were out at bars or going on dates, I was in the library, my eyes burning from staring at lines of code. The job paid just enough to cover my tuition, my rent, and the steady stream of financial emergencies that still came from home, though I had managed to reduce the flow a bit since moving out. The water heater broke, Connor. It's a disaster. Your father needs a new pair of glasses. I kept paying. I kept sending the money, because in my mind, this degree was the finish line. I told myself that once I had that piece of paper, everything would change. A master's in data analytics from a good university wasn't just a degree. It was a symbol. It meant a high salary. It meant respect. It meant I would no longer be just Connor, the kid who's good with computers. I would be Connor Reed MS. I imagined the moment I would tell them I'd been accepted into the program. I thought they'd be floored. Instead, my mother's first question was, "Is it going to affect how much you can help out with Ava's car insurance?" Still, I held on to the fantasy. I pictured graduation day. I saw my mom, Eleanor, dabbing a tear from her eye. I saw my dad, Richard, giving me a firm, proud handshake. I even pictured Ava looking up at me with something other than her usual indifference. I imagined them finally seeing me. Not the ATM, not the reliable backup plan, but me, their son, their brother. This fantasy was the fuel that got me through the all-nighters, the crushing workload, and the profound loneliness. The thought of their pride was a carrot on a very long, very exhausting stick. So when I mailed those invitations 2 months before the ceremony, it felt like I was mailing out tickets to my own coronation. It was a formal request for them to finally show up, to finally acknowledge the years of sacrifice. I even called them a week later to make sure they got them. "Oh yes, we got them, honey," Eleanor said, her voice distracted. "They're on the fridge. It's on a Saturday, right? We'll have to see what's going on with Ava's schedule." Even then, even with that casual dismissal, I held out hope. This was it. This was the one they wouldn't miss. They couldn't. It was a master's degree. It was the culmination of everything I had worked for, the very thing that was supposed to make them proud. This was the final gamble. I was pushing all my chips into the center of the table, betting on the slim chance that this time, they would choose me. And like any desperate gambler, I ignored all the signs telling me the deck was stacked against me from the start. The rapping on my door was sharp, impatient, not the sound of a friendly neighbor. I peered through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. 2 cops, their faces impassive, their hands resting near their belts. My mind raced. What did I do? Was it the locksmith? A noise complaint? I opened the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Can I help you, officers?" The older of the two, a man with tired eyes and a salt and pepper mustache, spoke first. "Are you Connor Reed?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Sir, we received a call requesting a wellness check. Your mother and Eleanor Reed called us. Said you were acting erratically, not answering your phone. She was concerned you might be a danger to yourself." A danger to myself. The words hung in the air, so absurd, so poisonous, that I almost laughed. It was the most brilliant, twisted move I could have imagined. I don't give her money, so I must be suicidal. I establish a boundary, so I must be mentally unstable. It was a checkmate move in a game of psychological warfare I didn't even know we were playing. She hadn't just gotten angry. She had tried to weaponize the system against me, to paint me as the crazy one, the problem that needed to be solved by men with badges. "Officers," I said, taking a deep breath and forcing my voice to remain steady. "I can assure you I am perfectly fine. My mother is upset with me. We had a financial disagreement." The younger officer, a black man named Davis according to his name tag, looked past me into my apartment. He saw the neat stacks of books, the clean kitchen counter, the half-finished cup of coffee on the table. He saw order, not chaos. "A financial disagreement?" Officer Davis asked, his gaze softening with a flicker of understanding. "Yes," I said. "She asked for a significant amount of money. I said no for the first time in my life. I changed my locks because she has a history of letting herself into my apartment without permission. I didn't answer her calls because I knew it would be a stream of verbal abuse. I am not a danger to myself. I'm just done." The older officer still looked skeptical, but Davis nodded slowly. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt like he saw the entire 16-year history in that one glance. He turned to his partner. "He seems fine, Mark. Looks like a family issue." Mark grunted but didn't argue. Davis turned back to me. "Sir, we have to ask, just for the report. Do you have any intention of harming yourself?" "Absolutely not, officer. The only thing I have any intention of doing is getting a job and starting my own life." Davis gave a small, wry smile. He lowered his voice slightly. "Listen, son. Sometimes when people start standing up for themselves, others panic. Happens more than you'd think. You just take care of yourself." And with that, they were gone. I closed the door, my back sliding down it until I was sitting on the floor. My body was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, clarifying rage. She hadn't just tried to guilt me. She hadn't just tried to manipulate me. She had tried to declare me legally and mentally incompetent for defying her. That was it. The line had been crossed. This was no longer just about money or missed graduations. This was about my sanity, my reputation, my very freedom. Officer Davis's words echoed in my head. Sometimes when people start standing up for themselves, others panic. My mother had panicked. And in doing so, she had just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. The war was on, and she had just fired the first and last shot she would ever get to land. After the police left, the rage simmering inside me cooled into something harder and more focused. Purpose. I was a data analyst. My entire skill set was built around finding patterns in chaos, extracting truth from a mountain of noise. It was time to apply those skills to my own life. I spent the rest of the day in a state of hyperfocus. I cleaned my apartment. I organized my files. I felt a desperate need for order, a way to counteract the psychological chaos my mother had tried to inflict. That evening, as I was sorting through my digital life, emails, bank statements, the works, an email from my bank popped up. The subject line was bland. "An update to your account." I almost deleted it, assuming it was just another marketing blast. But something made me pause. I opened it. "Dear Connor Reed," it began. "Thank you for recently opening a new Capital One Quicksilver credit card account with us." I froze. I hadn't opened a new credit card. I hadn't applied for anything. My heart started to pound a familiar, panicked rhythm. I immediately logged into my online banking portal. And there it was, listed right under my checking and savings accounts. A new credit card. Opened 2 weeks ago. I clicked on it. The balance was $1,874.32. My blood turned to ice. I scrolled through the transactions. There was a charge for Ava's Enchanted Suite 16, a catering company, for $1,200. A charge for Party Palace Rentals for $450. A charge from a bakery for a custom cake. It was all there. The entire party. My sister's party. Funded by a credit card opened fraudulently in my name. But it got worse. As I stared in disbelief, I noticed a small tab at the top of the page. View linked accounts. I clicked it, not knowing what I expected. And another account popped up. A second credit card. From a different bank, Chase Sapphire. This one had been opened a month prior. His balance was smaller, around $600. The charges were for department stores, Macy's, Nordstrom, clothes, shoes, a new dress for the party probably. The sheer, calculated betrayal of it all took my breath away. This wasn't a moment of desperation on her part. This was premeditated. She had been planning this for months. She had stolen my identity to fund my sister's extravagant party. And then, when she needed cash for the final deposits, she had the gall to text me and ask for it. The $2,100 she demanded wasn't to pay for the party. It was likely to cover the payments on the cards she'd opened in my name. She was trying to get me to pay off the debt from her own fraud. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number on the back of my debit card. I was transferred to the fraud department. A calm, professional woman named Evelyn Hayes came on the line. Mr. Reed, can you confirm you did not authorize these accounts? She asked. No, I did not. I think my mother opened them. I see, she said, a hint of weariness in her voice that told me this was not the first time she'd heard a story like this. I'm looking at the application now. It was done online. The cosigner on the account is listed as Eleanor M. Reed. Is that your mother? Yes, I breathed. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She had put her own name on it as a cosigner, probably thinking it gave her the right to use it. Mr. Reed, Evelyn said, her voice turning serious. This is a felony. It's identity theft. I can start the process of closing the accounts and disputing the charges, but you'll need to file a police report. We would also advise you to speak with a lawyer. A police report against my own mother. The thought was sickening. But what choice did I have? She had already brought the police to my door. She had escalated this to a level I never could have imagined. She had left a digital trail of breadcrumbs leading directly back to her. And now I was going to follow it. Before I went to the police, I knew I needed one more thing. I needed something undeniable. Something that couldn't be twisted or explained away by tears and excuses. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. Evelyn from the fraud department had given me an idea. She had mentioned, in passing, that any documentation you can provide is helpful. That's when I downloaded a call recording app onto my phone. Felt sleazy, manipulative. Felt like something my mother would do. The irony was not lost on me. But this wasn't about playing fair anymore. This was about survival. I unblocked her number and dialed. She picked up on the first ring. Connor. Her voice was a syrupy blend of relief and accusation. Oh, thank God. I was so worried. The police said you were okay. But I had to hear it from you. Why would you scare me like that? I took a deep breath, focusing on keeping my voice as flat and emotionless as possible. I'm fine, Mom. I'm calling about something else. Oh, yeah. I was just looking at my credit report. Funny thing. Says I have 2 new credit cards. A Capital One and a Chase. There was a brief pause on the other end. A tiny crack in her facade. Oh, that, she said, her voice a little too casual. I was going to tell you about that. You were, I asked, my voice dripping with false curiosity. When? I was helping you, she said, the confidence returning to her tone. She was shifting into her familiar role as the martyr. The mother who only ever does what's best for her ungrateful children. You're young. You need to build your credit history. A good credit score is very important for your future. I almost choked. You think opening 2 cards and maxing them out on party supplies is Building my credit? Don't be so dramatic, Connor, she scoffed. It's for your sister. It's for the family. You should be grateful you're in a position to help pay for Ava's Sweet 16. We're a family. It's family money. What's yours is ours. That was it. The line. The core of her entire twisted philosophy. The words that had governed my entire life. What's yours is ours. My own voice came out colder than I expected. No, Mom, I said slowly, enunciating each word. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is currently under criminal investigation. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was heavy, complete, and filled with the dawning horror of her realization. She had walked right into the trap. What did you just say? She stammered. I said I'm talking to the bank's fraud department, and they take this sort of thing very seriously. Identity theft is a felony, Mom. She started sputtering, the confident matriarch replaced by a panicked mess. You wouldn't do that to your own mother. You're destroying this family over a misunderstanding. No, I said, and a strange calm settled over me. You destroyed it the moment you decided my name was worth more to you than your son. I hung up the phone. I looked at my phone screen. The little red light indicated the call had been recorded. I saved the file. I named it Evidence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some power back. She had given me the knife, and now I just had to decide when and where to use it. The next 24 hours were a blur of calculated moves. I was no longer the emotional, wounded son. I was a strategist. My apartment became a war room. The target was no longer just survival. It was justice. First, I went to the police station. I filed a formal report for identity theft. I gave them the names on the accounts, the transaction histories I had printed out, and the contact information for Evelyn Hayes at the bank. I didn't give them the recording yet. That was my ace in the hole, and I wasn't going to play it until the stakes were highest. Next, I called my dad. His number was still blocked, so I used a friend's phone. His voice was weary when he answered. Dad, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I need to talk to you, Mom, and Ava, together, in person. Connor, your mother is a wreck, he sighed. She said you're accusing her of terrible things. I'm not accusing her of anything she didn't do, I said flatly. I have proof. We can either discuss this as a family first, or we can let the police and the banks handle it from here on out. Your choice. The threat worked. He agreed immediately. We decided to meet at a neutral location. A quiet, generic diner halfway between my apartment and their house. A place with vinyl booths and bad coffee, where no one could scream without making a scene. Before the meeting, I laid everything out on my coffee table. The printed bank statements, with the fraudulent charges highlighted in yellow. A copy of the police report, the case number circled in red. I made sure the audio file of my conversation with my mother was saved to my cloud storage and easily accessible on my phone. Then I called Leo, my one true ally. He had been my friend since college, the one person who had seen the dynamic in my family for what it was. He was the one who sat with me for hours after my college graduation, getting me drunk and letting me rage about the non-refundable weekend trip. Are you sure you want to do this, man? He asked, his voice full of genuine concern. You know how she is. She'll twist everything. I know, I said, looking at the pile of evidence on my table. But this time I have receipts. Literally. I need to see their faces when they realize I'm not backing down. I need to do this for myself. All right, he said. Call me the second you're out of there. And Connor, don't let them get in your head. Remember what they did. Remember the empty chairs. Hanging up, I felt a strange sense of calm. I was nervous, yes, but it was the nervousness of a soldier before a battle they have prepared for. I had my armor. I had my weapons. I had the truth on my side. For 16 years, I had played their game by their rules. Tonight, they were going to play mine. I gathered my files, put them into a crisp manila folder, and walked out the door, feeling, for the first time, like I was the one in control. The diner smelled of stale coffee and grease. My family was already there, huddled in a corner booth. My mother, Eleanor, was dabbing at her dry eyes with a napkin, putting on a performance for an audience of one. My father, my sister, Ava, was slouched against the window, staring at her phone, completely oblivious and uninterested. My dad, Richard, just looked exhausted, a man caught in a crossfire he had spent 2 decades avoiding. I slid into the booth opposite them. Thanks for coming. Connor, this is insane. My mother began immediately, her voice a theatrical whisper. Telling the bank I'm a criminal? Filing a police report? After everything I've done for you? I didn't take the bait. I simply opened the manila folder and slid the first document across the table. The Capital One statement. I pushed a yellow highlighter with it. Page 2. The charge for $1,200 to Ava's Enchanted Suite 16. Did I authorize that? She glanced at it and pushed it away. I told you, I was building your credit. I slid the next document over. The Chase statement. What about these? The charges at Macy's and Nordstrom? Was that building my credit too? Or were you just building Ava's birthday wardrobe? For the first time, Ava looked up from her phone, a flicker of interest in her eyes. My mother's face flushed. This is where my father finally spoke up. He picked up the statements, his brow furrowed. He looked at Eleanor, and for a fleeting, beautiful moment, I saw a spark of anger in his eyes. Eleanor, he said, his voice low, did you do this? Did you open credit cards in his name? My heart leaped. This was it. This was the moment he finally stood up, the moment he finally chose his son. The moment the tide would turn. Eleanor's face crumpled. The crocodile tears she had been faking before now seemed real. I did it for Ava, she sobbed, reaching for his hand. I just wanted her to have one perfect day. Connor has a good job. He has his whole life ahead of him. I thought he wouldn't mind. I did it for the family. I watched my father's face. I saw the anger melt away, replaced by his familiar, spineless pity. He looked from his crying wife to me, his face a mask of conflict. Connor, he said, his voice pleading. Look, she made a mistake, a big one, but she did it out of love. Can't you just call the bank? Tell them it was a misunderstanding? We'll pay you back. Every penny. You're tearing this family apart over some money. And there it was, the final betrayal. It wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, pathetic, and utterly devastating. He had seen the truth, laid out in black and white, and he had still chosen the lie. He had chosen the path of least resistance. He had chosen her. In that moment, any lingering hope I had for a relationship with my father died. He wasn't a victim of my mother's manipulation. He was her willing accomplice, her enabler. He was the warden who kept the prison doors locked from the inside. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. I wasn't there to save my family. My family was beyond saving. I was there to save myself. I looked at my father, at the man who had just failed his son for the last time. It was never about the money, Dad, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. And you still don't get that. My father flinched at the coldness in my voice. My mother, sensing she had won him over, pressed her advantage. She sat up a little straighter, the tears magically drying up. See, Richard, she said, her voice dripping with vindication. He's being cruel. He enjoys this. He wants to see his own mother in trouble. She turned her venomous gaze on me. You always were a dramatic, ungrateful child. I just looked at her. I let her words hang in the air, let my father absorb them, let Ava hear them. I let the silence stretch, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. My mother's smug smile started to fade, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. She was used to me yelling, arguing, pleading. This quiet, calm version of me was unnerving to her. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, I said softly, reaching into my pocket. I was hoping that seeing the proof in black and white would be enough for you to finally tell the truth, to apologize. But you just can't do it, can you? I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. You didn't just make a mistake, Mom. You committed a felony. And you were so proud of it, you even confessed. Her face went pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about our phone call yesterday, I said. The one where I asked you about the credit cards. I hit play. The small speaker on my phone was surprisingly clear in the quiet diner. My own voice, calm and questioning, filled the booth first. Then came my mother's. I was helping you, her recorded voice chirped, oozing false sincerity. You need to build your credit history. My father's eyes widened. He stared at my mother, his mouth slightly agape. Don't be so dramatic, Connor. The recording continued, her voice full of condescending arrogance. You should be grateful you're in a position to help pay for Ava's Sweet 16. We're a family. It's family money. What's yours is ours. That line hit the air like a physical blow. My father visibly recoiled. Ava, for the first time, looked up from her phone, her eyes wide with shock. She was finally listening. I let the recording continue all the way to my final cold statement. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is currently under criminal investigation. The silence that followed the recording was absolute. A family of 4, frozen in a tableau of disgrace. The only sound was the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. My mother stared at the phone on the table as if it were a venomous snake. Her face had gone from pale to a blotchy, furious red. The mask of the caring, martyred mother had been incinerated, leaving only the ugly, raw face of a con artist who had just been caught. You recorded me? She whispered, her voice trembling with rage. That's illegal. In our state, it only requires one-party consent, and I consented, I said calmly, reciting the fact I had looked up an hour before the meeting. I knew you would lie. I knew you would twist it. So I let you bury yourself. And you did. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his wife with a look of horrified disillusionment I had never seen before. He finally saw her. He finally saw the woman I had been dealing with my entire life. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had in years. I'm done, I said, my voice clear and strong. I have given this recording to the bank. They're moving forward. I suggest you find a very good lawyer. You're going to need one. I left the folder of evidence on the table. I didn't need it anymore. I turned and walked out of the diner, not looking back. The weight of their world was no longer on my shoulders. It was their problem now. All of it. I didn't go to my sister's Sweet 16, obviously. The day of the party, I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned my phone off, drove out to a state park, and went for a long hike. I just walked for hours, listening to the sound of the wind in the trees, feeling the sun on my face. I was trying to reconnect with myself, the person I was before I became the family ATM, the family disappointment, the family detective. As I was driving home that evening, I turned my phone back on. It exploded with notifications. Missed calls and frantic texts from my father, my aunt, my cousins. I ignored them all. But then an email caught my eye. It was from Evelyn Hayes at the bank. The subject line was simple. Update on case number 7345. Dear Mr. Reed, the email read, as per our protocol in active fraud investigations involving large vendor payments, we dispatched a field agent, accompanied by local law enforcement, to the venue of the event to verify the services rendered. They arrived at approximately 7:30 p.m. this evening. We will be in touch with further updates. I had to read it twice. They sent a bank agent and the police to the party, to the actual party. A slow smile spread across my face. I hadn't asked them to do that. I hadn't even known it was a possibility. It was just bank policy. It was the cold, impersonal, beautiful logic of a system designed to protect itself. Later, I got the full story in bits and pieces from a cousin who had been there. The party was in full swing. The venue was draped in pink and silver. A DJ was playing. Ava was in her brand new, illegally funded dress, holding court with her friends. My parents were playing the role of proud, generous hosts. And then 2 uniformed police officers and a man in a sharp suit walked in. They didn't make a scene. They were quiet, professional. They walked directly to my father and asked to speak with him and his wife in private. But in a room full of 100 people, private doesn't exist. The music faltered. Conversations died down. Everyone stared. My cousin said you could see the color drain from my mother's face. The man in the suit, the bank agent, started asking questions about the credit card used to pay for the venue. He used words like fraudulent account and identity theft. The guests couldn't hear everything, but they heard enough. The whispers started to ripple through the crowd. The party, which was supposed to be the crowning achievement of my mother's social calendar, the ultimate testament to her perfect family, had just become a crime scene. The DJ, sensing the mood had shifted from celebration to public humiliation, quietly packed up his equipment. Guests started making awkward excuses and slipping out the door. Within 30 minutes, the grand ballroom was nearly empty. Ava was reportedly in tears, not because of the fraud, but because her perfect party had been ruined. My mother, for once, was speechless. Her reputation, the thing she valued more than her own son, was being dismantled in front of all her friends. There was no way to spin this. There was no way to play the victim. The truth had shown up, uninvited, and it had shut the whole party down. It was a spectacular karmic implosion. And the best part? I had nothing to do with it. I was miles away, breathing fresh air. All I did was tell the truth. The consequences, for once, had landed on the right doorstep. This is the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You guys are awesome. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The days following the party were a storm of voicemails and texts. Most of them were from my father. His tone had shifted from pleading to outright desperation. The public humiliation had done what my private pain never could. It had made the problem real for him. I let his calls go to voicemail for 2 full days. I needed the silence. I needed to let the dust settle in my own head before I engaged with their chaos again. Finally, on the 3rd day, I saw a call coming in from him and, on an impulse, I answered. I put it on speakerphone. I wanted to be able to walk away if I needed to. "Connor, thank God," he said, his voice raspy. "Son, you have to stop this. You have to call the bank and tell them it was all a misunderstanding." I was silent for a moment, listening to the sheer panic in his voice. "There is no misunderstanding, Dad," I said calmly. "She stole my identity. That's a crime. It's not a family squabble. Your mother, she's not eating. She's not sleeping. She's a mess. The bank is demanding full repayment immediately or they'll press charges. We don't have that kind of money, Connor. Not after the party." The irony of that last statement was so thick I could have choked on it. "That sounds like her problem," I said. "She bought the ticket. She gets to take the ride." "This is destroying us," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Is that what you want? To destroy your own family?" And that's when the last bit of sympathy I might have had for him evaporated. He still didn't get it. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling to ask how I was. He was calling to perform damage control. He was calling to try and shove the genie back in the bottle, to get me to go back to my designated role, the family shock absorber. "Let me be very clear, Dad," I said, my voice as hard as steel. "The family was already destroyed. It was destroyed every time you stood by and watched her use me as a bank account. It was destroyed every time you let her prioritize a party over my graduation. You didn't have my back then, and I certainly don't have yours now. This is the consequence of your actions. Both of you." He started to argue, to bring up the past, to talk about the good times that I honestly couldn't remember. I cut him off. "I am not setting myself on fire to keep you warm anymore," I said. "This conversation is over. Don't call me again." And I hung up. I immediately blocked his number again. It felt different this time. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of finality. A boundary drawn not in sand, but in concrete. The door was closed. The lock was thrown. And for the first time, I felt truly, completely, and blessedly free from the obligation of their mess. With the emotional ties severed, dealing with the logistical fallout was surprisingly easy. It was just a series of tasks, a checklist for my new life. Evelyn Hayes from Capital One was a godsend. She walked me through the final steps. Because I had filed a police report and provided the recording, the bank's case was airtight. They officially designated the accounts as fraudulent. The nearly $2,500 of debt was wiped from my name. It was transferred into a collections account under my mother's name. She was now legally obligated to pay it back in full. Whether she did or not was no longer my concern. The real cleanup, though, was fortifying my own life against any future intrusions. I placed a freeze on my credit with all three major bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. This meant no one, not even me, could open a new line of credit in my name without going through a complicated verification process. It was a digital fortress, and I was the only one with the key. I went to my bank and closed the checking account I had held since I was 16. It was the account my mother was linked to as a cosigner when I was a minor. I had never bothered to change it. I opened a new account at a completely different bank, ensuring there were no residual ties, no forgotten permissions that could give her a backdoor into my finances. The social fallout for my family was, from what I heard, swift and brutal. The story of the party-turned-police visit spread like wildfire through their social circle. The Hamiltons, old family friends who had been at the party, were apparently telling everyone. My mother, who had built her identity around being a pillar of their suburban community, was now a pariah. People she had known for years were suddenly crossing the street to avoid her. I felt a strange sense of detachment from it all. It wasn't joy or schadenfreude. It was just closure. It was the natural, logical end to a story of deceit. Actions have consequences. It was one of the first lessons you learn as a child, a lesson my parents had somehow managed to avoid their entire adult lives. It seemed the universe had finally decided it was time for them to get a crash course. And I was no longer willing to be the one to bail them out of class. 6 months can feel like a lifetime. 6 months after walking out of that diner, I was living in a different world. It wasn't just that I had moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city. It was that I was breathing different air. After years of sending my money home, I finally had savings. Real savings. It allowed me to quit my dead-end data entry job and focus all my energy on finding a career that utilized my master's degree. 3 months later, I landed it. A position as a junior data analyst at a tech firm called Novadata Labs. The first time I got my salary deposit, I just stared at the number in my bank account. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place. My first instinct, born of years of conditioning, was a jolt of anxiety. Mom will be calling soon. What's the new emergency? Then came the wave of relief. The phone wouldn't ring. The money was mine. All of it. My new boss was a man named Mr. Sterling, the CEO of the company. He was everything my father wasn't. Decisive, fair, and he valued competence above all else. During my 3-month review, he called me into his office. I was terrified I had done something wrong. "Connor," he said, leaning back in his chair, "your work on the quarterly projections was outstanding. You didn't just run the numbers, you found a narrative in them. You identified an inefficiency that's going to save this company a lot of money." He smiled. "I'm giving you a promotion. You're leading the new analytics team for the marketing department." I was speechless. A promotion? After 3 months? I had spent 28 years trying to earn a single "I'm proud of you" from my own family and gotten nothing. And here, a near stranger was recognizing my value, rewarding my hard work, and trusting me with responsibility. It was a form of validation so pure and professional that it felt more meaningful than any familial approval I had ever craved. My life started to fill with genuine connections. I reconnected with friends I had neglected while I was buried in work and family drama. Leo and I started a weekly tradition of grabbing a beer and just talking about work, about dating, about nothing at all. I even started seeing a therapist, someone to help me unpack the years of emotional baggage. It was hard work, untangling all the knots of guilt and obligation, but with each session, I felt lighter. One evening, I was having dinner with Leo, and he asked me if I ever missed them. I thought about it for a moment. I didn't miss the anxiety, the demands, the constant feeling of being not good enough. But I realized there was a phantom limb, a dull ache where a family was supposed to be. I don't miss them, I said slowly, but I think I'll always be sad about what we could have been. I'm mourning the family I never had. It was a sad thought, but it wasn't a crippling one. It was just a fact. A scar from a wound that had finally, after all these years, begun to heal. Just when I thought the past was firmly in the rearview mirror, a ghost appeared. It arrived in a plain white envelope, tucked into my new mailbox. My mother's looping, overly ornate handwriting was on the front. My new address. My Aunt Carol, the family's resident busybody, must have given it to her. My first impulse was to throw it away unopened. But curiosity, that old human failing, got the better of me. I took it inside, slid it open with a kitchen knife, and unfolded the single sheet of stationery inside. It was a letter, a 2-page, rambling attempt at an apology that was, in reality, just another masterclass in manipulation. It started with a litany of her own suffering, how she couldn't sleep, how her friends had abandoned her, how the stress of having to pay back the bank was affecting her health. It was all about her. My pain, my betrayal, my stolen identity. Those were just minor plot points in the grand tragedy of her life. The closest she came to an actual apology was a single sentence buried in the second paragraph. I'm sorry if my actions hurt you, but you have to understand, I was under a lot of pressure. I'm sorry if, the classic non-apology. It wasn't, I'm sorry for what I did. It was, I'm sorry you were sensitive enough to get your feelings hurt. She was still blaming me. Even now, the letter ended with a plea. Ava was struggling with the social fallout at school. My father's health was poor. The family was broken. And only I, the magnanimous son, could fix it. We can get past this, she wrote. All you have to do is be willing to forgive. Family is forever, Connor. I read the letter twice. The old Connor would have felt a pang of guilt. The old Connor would have focused on the word forgive and tortured himself over his own unwillingness to do so. The old Connor would have felt the weight of their happiness settle back onto his shoulders. But I wasn't the old Connor anymore. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. It was like reading a spam email. The words were there, but they had no power over me. They were just a pathetic, transparent attempt to regain control. I walked over to the kitchen counter where I kept a small shredder for junk mail. I thought about writing back. I thought about sending a single sheet of paper with the words "No, thank you" written on it. I thought about sending a bill for 16 years of unpaid emotional labor. Instead, I did something far more powerful. I did nothing. I fed her letter into the shredder. I watched as her flowery words and empty apologies were sliced into meaningless, confetti-like strips. It was a quiet, anticlimactic act, but it was the truest response I could give. Her words, her guilt, her version of family. They no longer had a place in my life. They were junk mail, and they belonged in the trash. The silence was my final answer. My home office isn't much, just a small desk in the corner of my living room, but it's my favorite spot in the apartment. It's where I'm building my new life, one line of code at a time. On the wall above my monitor, I have 3 things hanging in a simple black frame. The first is my master's degree. For a long time, I couldn't even look at it without feeling a wave of sadness for the lonely day it represented. But now I see it differently. It's not a symbol of their rejection. It's a symbol of my resilience. I earned that. I did it for myself, by myself. It represents the foundation I built when my own family's was crumbling. The second is my employee ID badge from Novadata Labs. It's just a piece of plastic with my awkward, smiling photo on it. But it's proof. Proof that my skills have value. Proof that respect and a fair salary can be earned through merit, not begged for through sacrifice. It represents the professional family that accepted me based on my worth, not my wallet. And the third thing, right in the middle, is the old brass lock from my first apartment. The one the locksmith replaced. It's tarnished and scratched, but to me it's beautiful. It's not a symbol of locking them out. It's a symbol of letting myself in. It represents the moment I chose my own peace, my own sanity, my own future. It's the key to the life I have now. My journey wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about destroying my family. It was about reaching a point where I had to choose between their comfort and my own survival. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made. The empty chairs they left at my graduation ended up being the greatest gift they ever gave me, because they forced me to finally stand up and walk away into a life of my own making. A life where I am valued, respected, and, most importantly, free. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's not easy to talk about this stuff, but I feel it's important. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace? I genuinely love to hear about it. Please, share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Take care of yourselves.